We need to find out the value of this given expression provided 1 omega and omega square are cube roots of unity. Now since they are the cube roots of unity, then it follows that the sum of the roots, which will be 1 plus omega square, that was equals to 0, and the product of the roots, which is simply omega cube, that value is equals to 1. So with these two properties, let's try to find out the value of a given expression. So we have 1 plus omega, so that is multiplied to 1 plus omega squared, which is multiplied to 1 plus omega raised to the power of 4. But we can use the property omega cube equals to 1 to rewrite omega raised to the power of 4 as omega cubed times omega. Omega cube was 1, so we have omega. So this is the value of omega raised to the power of 4. So let's call it 1 plus omega. Then we have omega raised to the power of 5, so that will be 1 plus omega raised to the power of 5 now becomes omega cubed times omega squared. So since omega cube is 1, the omega raised to the power of 5, this is the same as omega squared. That means we have omega squared in place of omega raised to the power of 5. This is now simply, we have 1 plus omega repeating. So that gives us 1 plus omega whole squared. And this is multiplied to 1 plus omega squared, which is also repeating. So this will be simply squared. Now, let's use this particular property that 1 plus omega squared equals to 0. So we'll replace 1 plus omega with negative omega squared whole squared multiplied to 1 plus omega squared. So this will be replaced with negative omega squared. So this gives us negative omega raised to the power of 4. Since this is negative, so we are squaring it, this will become positive, times positive omega squared. Now omega squared, this value is equals to omega. So we have omega times omega squared, which is equals to omega cube, and omega cube, according to the property, this value is equals to 1. So this means that the value of this particular expression, this is equals to 1, provided 1 omega and omega square are cube roots of unity. Now using the same idea, we'll try to find out the value of this expression. Now in the new expression, we have negative. So let's begin. So here we have 1 minus omega multiplied to 1 minus omega squared multiplied to 1 minus omega raised to the power of 4. But we know that omega raised to the power of 4 is omega multiplied to 1 minus omega raised to the power of 5, which is simply omega squared. Now we have 1 minus omega repeating. So we have 1 minus omega squared. So this will be multiplied to 1 minus omega squared, which is also repeating. That this is simply squared. Now the task will be to find out these two values. Here we cannot immediately use the fact that the sum of the roots is equals to 0. So before coming to this property, what we'll do, let's expand this. So here we have 1 minus omega whole squared. So this is simply 1 minus 2 omega plus omega squared multiplied to 1 minus omega squared whole squared. So that is 1 minus 2 omega squared plus omega raised to the power of 4. Now we can rewrite our expression as 1 plus, so here we have minus 2 omega, but we'll write it as plus omega squared, but we'll subtract 3 omega from it. Then here we have omega raised to the power of 4, but omega raised to the power of 4, this is simply omega. We can rewrite our expression as 1 plus omega. So here we have negative 2 omega squared, but we'll write it as plus omega squared minus 3 omega squared. Would mean the same thing. Now let's use the fact that the sum of the roots are 0. So this leaves us with negative 3 omega multiplied to negative 3 omega squared. So negative 3 omega times negative 3 omega squared, this value equals 9 omega cubed. And we know that omega cubed, that value is equals to 1. So this gives us 9. So that means the value of this expression, that's equals to 9 when 1 omega and omega square are cube roots of unity.